Thank you for listening to the Florida Community of Mindfulness's Dharma Talks. I'm Angela Parrish, Executive Director for FCM, and we're very happy to make these talks from our teacher Fred Eppsteiner available to you. If you find this talk of benefit, please consider making a donation to support us so that we can continue to offer these recordings freely. You'll find a donation button on the Talks section of our website, floridamindfulness.org. May you be happy and free from suffering.
It's a text that comes from the Tibetan tradition called the 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva. And it was written by Togme Zangpo, and he's from 13th, 14th century, ancient. And this text, and again, I'm reading from a translation by an American Buddhist, Ken MacLeod, who also not only has translated, done a translation of the 37. And the 37 are all like verses. So each of the 37 are 4-line verses. So in this book, he not only translated the verses, but he's done his own commentary. It's called Reflections on Silver River. And Togme Zangpo is an interesting character. Again, this is a very much loved text within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but really not known outside of it, even though the practices of a bodhisattva are known outside of it. This specific text isn't. And just very quickly, Togme he was an orphan early on, lost both his parents at different times. It was often the case in earlier times when illnesses and disease were much more present, and people did not, the causes of death were much more manifold, even though they seem to be still very much with us. So anyway, he became a monk at an early age, had a great, really proclivity for learning and scholarship, and even though he came from a very poor background, without a lot of support, he was able really to develop himself. But he sort of had a little crisis at a certain point. He was doing quite well. He was getting a lot of awards for his scholarship, was being asked to be an abbot of a monastery. So he was doing quite well in the profession of being a monk. But in the Tibetan tradition, it's not like here where your institution takes care of you. You are really responsible for your own. Everybody was sort of responsible for finding support if you were a monk or a nun. And if you came from a family that had means, often they would support you. Or you would go find, or maybe you might have some other benefactors from your village, from your larger extended family, who would support you during your life as a monk. He didn't have that because he was an orphan and came from a poor family. So the alternative then was to earn some money. And how do traditionally monks and nuns earn money? They go out into the villages and they do rituals, right? All kinds of rituals. Some of them would be death and funereal rituals, but they'd also, lay people would like all kinds of little kind of rituals for safety and protection and, warding off negative things in their life. And so the performance of ritual in people's homes was an opportunity to earn a little money. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was, that was kind of. But he didn't want to do that. He really wanted to devote himself to practice. So it says that these 37 practices of a bodhisattva were something he wrote. It was a poem that he wrote for himself, right? To remind himself of what is really the essence of this practice that I'm doing. And supposedly, out of this came a desire to, when he was offered his next higher post within the monastic establishment, he turned it down and said, "I'm not your guy. And actually, he then went off into the mountains. This was very traditional, and lived the life of a recluse, of a hermit for 20 or 30 years. Just devoting himself to pure practice. But it was supposedly this text that he wrote to himself that has been passed down and is now called Verses 37 Practices of Bodhisattva. So I'm just going to see how much time we have. Just share a few of them. Well, we'll probably begin in the beginning. So he begins in a very traditional way of paying homage. This is very traditional. Before anybody, a teacher would give his own commentary teaching, he would pay homage, usually to his own teachers or the Buddha or something like that. So he says, his homage is, you who see that experience has no coming and going, yet pour your energy solely into helping beings. My excellent teachers and Lord of all seeing, I ever humbly honor with my body, speech, and mind. Quite beautiful. When he says, you who see that experience, in other words, these are beings that are awake. They see beyond the comings and goings of this world. They see that which has no coming and going, that which we might say is eternal, right? So you who have an experience, basically you who have an awakened mind, which means you really freed yourself, right? You liberated your mind from all its impurities and impediments and contaminations and boundaries, yet pour your energy solely into helping beings. So this is he's talking about in Buddhism what's called bodhisattvas, right? That even though you have this great awakening, this great freedom in yourself, you are not just out for yourself, so to speak. Just because you've liberated yourself, you don't feel that that's the end. Which again, for many people who traditionally practiced in India, Tibet, other places, a spiritual path, it was only about their own awakening, their own freedom, right? And yet he says in the Bodhisattva path, yet pour your energy solely into helping beings. So this is really the essence of a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is someone who is trotting the path of awakening in order to benefit all beings, not just myself. Okay, so this is what he's saying. My excellent teachers, I honor you with my body, speech, and mind. And then in his second stanza is setting his broader intention for this text in his life. He says, full awakening, Buddha, the source of joy and well-being, comes as you master the noble way. Because mastery depends on knowing how to practice, I now explain the practice of all bodhisattvas. Okay? So he's saying, so this path to awakening, sort of what you were asking, this path to full awakening, Buddha. So what is a Buddha? A Buddha is not a supernatural being. Siddhartha was not a supernatural being. Buddha means someone who is Buddha, someone who is awake. Right? People would come to the Buddha and said, what are you? Are you a god? Are you an emanation, an incarnation of a god? From India, that's kind of way everything is so. And he would say, no, I'm awake. Buddha means someone who is awake. Okay? So he says, this full awakening, this Buddhahood, the source of all joy and well-being, will come to all of us as we master the noble way, the way of practice. Because mastery depends, so now he's getting practical, but in other words, to master the noble way depends on mastery. Mastery means what? Competence, skill. There is something here to be mastered. Right? In the same way we talked earlier about any skill, a musical skill, a medical skill, a craft skill, whatever where we want to develop ourselves in, there has to be mastery, right? How do we develop mastery? Through practice, right? Practice implies diligence and all these other things. So now he says, because mastery depends on knowing how to practice, I will now explain the practice. Okay? So that's his introduction. So number one, he says, right now you have a good boat, fully equipped and available, hard to find. To free yourself and others from the sea of samsara, day and night, constantly study, reflect, and meditate. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Okay. So what is he saying? So these all have meaning. When he says, right now you have a good boat, many of you may be saying, no, I don't even own a boat. What's he talking about? Okay, fully equipped and available. No. What he's talking about is this vehicle of our body mind. Right? This is our vehicle in this life. Right? We have a body. We're incarnated in a body. This is our vehicle for this life. Many people see their bodies and taking care of their bodies and indulging in the pleasures of body is the purpose of life. But in the Bodhisattva path, the body is just a vehicle. Right? It's something we ride in that will take us where we want to go. So he says, you have a good boat now. Right? Your body's alive. Hopefully it has some degree of health. Like for all of us, we are fortunate, right? We have a good life. How do I know we have a good life? Not by how much is in your bank account or where you live or anything. It's because you're here. This shows me you have leisure, right? You have some time. You're not like many people in this world, just either because of necessity, working from dawn to dusk, just to survive, right? Or like many people in this world, constantly driven to accumulate and get more and more and more and more, right? We are acknowledging, oh, we have time. I have time to what? To come to a day of mindfulness, right? To meditate, to study. Whew, what good fortune I have. You see? What good fortune. And I've come in contact with a spiritual path that leads to awakening. And I've encountered teachers in this life who show the way. So all this together is called, having a good boat, fully equipped and available, but hard to find. Most people don't have it for all many reasons. So now we have this vehicle, we have this good boat. It's a good boat whose purpose is to free ourselves and others from the sea of suffering, the sea of delusion. So then he says, day and night, constantly study, reflect, and meditate. Now, many of you might be saying, well, what's he saying here? Go off, I have a job, and I have a family, and I have all these things. How can I study, reflect, and meditate? Well, we can, you see. It may not, if we think studying and reflecting and meditating just go on in the formal meditation hall, then we'll say, this practice is not for me, is it? Right? Because I can't. I got too many responsibilities, don't we? I can't possibly study, reflect, and meditate all day like a bodhisattva, but that's not true. Because all day long, whatever we're doing, we have the capacity of being present and mindful, don't we? We can cultivate mindfulness throughout the day, no matter where we are, no matter what our work is. We can learn to be mindful and present. We can learn to develop concentrating. So whatever I'm doing throughout the day, I'm fully concentrated on it. Oh, right? And when we have some leisure time, rather than, binge watching this or binge watching that or doing all the other things, we have time to study. If we have time to do Facebook, we have time to study. Right? So, we have it. Right? And he's just reminding us to use this life, right? To accomplish our goals of being a bodhisattva. Is that clear? He's just... So don't think, we have to go off and renounce the world. if we really want to develop ourselves spiritually. No. But we do have to renounce a lot of the things we do that are sort of meaningless or take us away from that which is most essential. Is that clear? And cultivate it in our daily life. Then verse 2. Attraction to those close to you catches you in its currents. Aversion to those who oppose you burns inside you. Indifference that ignores what needs to be done is a black hole. Leave your homeland. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Now again, you might go like the first one, leave your homeland. Does that mean, again, I just, move to North Carolina or something? Leave my homeland, leave my family. Well, again, he's really not saying that. But what he's saying is we have built this home that's based on attraction and attachment to those things, people, situation, pleasures, activities, experiences that we like, right? We are attracted to them and we are attached to them. To those experiences, people, situations, whatever that we don't like, we are aversive to them. And the lot of the rest of life we're just indifferent to. We don't pay attention to, right? So he's really talking about this is our home. We live in the home of attachment and aversion and indifference. He's saying, leave that home in which we dwell, that this is all our concerns, right? We're just endlessly, caught up in, right? Those that we have a positive relationship with and are attached to. We're endlessly involved. If we're not actively involved, we're always thinking about all those things. On the other hand, we have our whole list of people and things that we're aversive to and negative to. And that's also consuming a lot of our energy. And then there's a lot of which we should be paying attention to, and yet we are indifferent to. Right? We distance ourselves from. So he's saying, is that clear? This is the home for us to leave. To find a better home. A home that is not endlessly going back between attraction and aversion and attachment and and indifference, but an ability to be present to everything in life, to show up with everything in life, and not to get attached, to really anything. We're not. Again, it doesn't mean you don't have likes, you don't have dislikes, you don't have those people because of causing conditions that you're close with, and those people you're not close with, right? It doesn't mean that none of that doesn't arise. But that's not like the summation of our life. That's not the energy of our life. Always, going around from attraction to aversion, positive, negative, endlessly, He's saying leave that behind. And learn to live in the world, like we said earlier, with openness and presence and intelligence. Sometimes things are pleasurable. Sometimes things are not pleasurable, right? Sometimes we're with people we love and enjoy being. Sometimes we're with people that we don't enjoy. That's just life. Sometimes things go our way, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're unsuccessful, right? Sometimes life is smooth sailing, sometimes it's rocky. That just, don't be attached to either side of that, right? Just let that be. Because we're cultivating what? The path of the awakened ones. So we're cultivating mindfulness, concentration, insight. No matter which way it goes. Right? But worldly people, their whole concern is which way is it going, you see? Right? And we all want it to go which way? Our way. Right? And so we have a very clear agenda, whether it's conscious or not. When life is going this way, when people are going this way, when everything is going this way, then things are good. When it's not like that, when things aren't going our way and people aren't acting their way, or etc., then things are bad, right? So we say to people when we haven't seen them, "How was your day today?" And they'll say, "What? I've had a good day. I've had a bad day." Right? Don't people talk this way? Now, what do they really mean when they say they've had a good day? Things have gone my way. That's a good day, right? And a bad day is things haven't gone my way. That's all that's going. There's really no such thing as a bad day and a good day. They're just days, right? But so that shows us that's our attachment. In Zen there's a saying, every day's a good day when nothing hangs in the mind. Well, that's interesting. Every day's a good day when nothing hangs in the mind. We're not caught. We're not fixated. We're just present to what's arising. Then verse 3. So again, remember, he's writing this for himself. So he's clear about what his practice is. Remember, they were trying to get him to go, "Hey, why don't you go out and start going into town and doing these rituals and earn a little money," right? And he's reminding himself, that's not the practice. So number 3. Don't engage disturbances and emotional reactions gradually fade away. Don't engage distractions, and spiritual practice naturally grows. Keep awareness clear and vivid, and confidence in the way arises. Rely on silence. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. These are, they're short, but they really, as you can see, have a lot. And if you can also see, there's sort of variations on sort of what we've been talking about, right? So, these things disturb us. The disturbances arise in life, right? We might consider traffic a disturbance, right? For many people, traffic is a disturbance. For some people, it's a big. People kill these days because of it, right? It's so we know. So traffic is a disturbance, isn't it? What else is a disturbance? Indigestion is a disturbance. What else is a disturbance in our life? What noise is disturbance? Hey, I'm here to meditate in a quiet way. Who's making all that noise, right? Disturbing my meditation. Is that clear? I think my minder is showing up. I was sort of enjoying being on my own down here. The problem is I move my head, I know that. Brian would like me to just kind of be like a robot. Okay. Right on cue, a disturbance. Right? Can you see? That's there it is. That's a disturbance. Right? Things were kind of moving in a certain direction. All of a sudden, something comes along that disturbs the talk, disturbs the atmosphere. Right? Disturbance, just like traffic, just like a stomach ache. What other kind of disturbances do we have in our life? Weather. Yeah, you Sunday's your day off, and you plan to what? Go to the beach or go to the country, and what happens? Rain. So rain's a disturbance. Disturbs us. Anybody else have a disturbance in their life? What? Work. Things work. Just work in general. The whole thing's a disturbance, or things happen at work that disturb people. There are people disturbing you. Yeah. People not acting the way they should act. Right? Yeah, that's disturbing to us. Disturbed by people. Anybody else have a disturbance in life? Anything else disturbing in your life? What? Your body is not acting the way it should act, right? And so we are disturbed. It's a disturbance. We want our bodies to be healthy and feel a certain way and be able to do things. And when they can't, it disturbs. It's a disturbance. Anybody else have a disturbance? Yes. Good.
Watching your favorite show and electricity goes off.
Watching your favorite show. Charlie just really ramped it up to a much higher level here. Yeah. Got the whole evening planned around this show. And can you believe the electricity went off? See, this is modern America. This is a level of suffering unknown in historical times. Right? You can't get your emails. You can't get your text. Yes, Nancy, you had another one. Chatter, and we're disturbed by the chatter in our mind. We want a peaceful, quiet mind, and we're disturbed by the chatter. Okay? So, what does he say? Again, these are practices. He says, don't engage disturbances, and emotional reactions gradually fade away. So this is a key point of practice. He doesn't say, you see, the worldly person, right, their reaction to disturbances is to what? Get rid of them. Control, manipulate. That's our strategy, right? 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 So when something disturbing arises, we want to control the disturbance. Right? And if we can't control the disturbance, we fixate on it. Right? That person at work, we just go, oh, why don't they just shut up? Why don't they just... You see what I'm saying? Or we're upset with the chatter in our mind. Thoughts would just stop, then I could be peaceful. Right? And all the things that we talked about, right? A disturbance, a so-called disturbance arise, and we engage with them. Can you see? This is the problem. We fixate. We grab onto. Right? You're driving along, and all of a sudden, what happens to the pattern of the flow of the vehicles? Stops. Right? That's just a fact of reality, isn't it? And yet we engage in it. We get what? How do we engage in it? We start thinking about it. Oh, this shouldn't be happening. I wonder what's happening. You know what I mean? So, you understand? I got to get somewhere. And, So we start a process of thinking about something that has happened, right? We engage with the disturbance. And therefore we have emotional reactivity. We have irritation, we have frustration, we have anger. We know now people even have rage. Right? So if you think about all the disturbances in your life which happen, the problem the disturbance, or is the problem the way we react to the disturbance? This is important. Because we think the disturbance is the problem, right? So we're here meditating, and all of a sudden we hear a noise, right? Somebody's working a chainsaw, or somebody's, doing something, right? Right? We think the chainsaw is disturbing our meditation. No, it's our agitation around the chainsaw sound that is disturbing our minds, isn't it? That's just a sound. Ears hear sounds. Right? That's what they're there for. That which decides which sounds are pleasant and which sounds are not pleasant, that's our mind. Right? And how do we get to that point? We don't even know it, you see. We just can't let a sound arise and just be a sound. We can't just allow traffic just to be traffic. We can't just allow the jerks at work to be jerks. Right? Can you see? Right? So we attach, we fixate, we ruminate, and we experience what? Emotions. Suffering. Yeah, this kind of negative emotional reactivity. So even though this is a man living in the 14th century, in a totally different historical time, in a very different, everything was different in a certain say. It should make you feel good to know that the human mind and the human condition hasn't changed one iota. It just looks different, you see. We dress differently, we talk differently, we got a lot more going on, but fundamentally, we're doing the same thing. Right? So he says, when disturbances arise, don't engage them. Just accept them for what they are. Because if you do engage with them, you will then cause yourself and perhaps others suffering. Anybody ever been caught in traffic on the Howard Franklin Bridge? Right? I mean, there's no way out. It's kind of wonderful. It's right. You know, you can't go backwards. You can't go forwards. You can't go over the bridge. You know, I mean, you know, other times you can kind of, you know, figure out another route for yourself or something. But to be stuck in the Howard Franklin Bridge is so wonderful because there's no option, and yet the mind refuses to accept that, doesn't it? Yeah, right. There's lots of other options. You're right, exactly right. But that's not emotional affliction. Right? The emotional affliction is when we irritate or we get worried. Oh, what's going to happen if I'm late for? Can you see? And that emotional reactivity is coming because we just did not let the disturbance be what it is. Just a disturbance. Disturbance is just something that's happening not according to my plan. Whose plan? My plan. What? Is that true? This is important. I mean, this, you know, you don't have to be a great meditator to reduce your emotional reactivity. You know, don't think, oh my, you know, this is only for the enlightened ones. No, this is for anybody. Right? Don't engage in disturbances. Let them be. And your emotional reactivity will decrease, i.e. suffering. Then he says, so first he says, don't engage disturbances. Next he says, don't engage distractions. Now, we might say, in a monastery in 13th century Tibet, what did they know about distractions? Right? You know, come to 21st century America, you'll learn about the endless distractions, right? Right? And he says, don't engage distractions. Again, lots of things that distract us all the time. Lots of things pulling here, pulling there, right? I was saying the other week, I mean, it's so easy these days when you're on what you think is a target. Again, I'm primitive. I'm sure most of you are far advanced than me. You know, I'm still back to kind of like Google searches and stuff, you know. It's just so easy to get distracted, even though you're coming on there because why? Because Google is telling you, if you're interested in this, these are another 50 subjects you may be interested in. Everybody know what you know what I mean? That's distraction, you see. You see. You know, we thought we came on to accomplish a certain task, and we end up just, right? And so much of social media these days is like that. Right? You see what I'm saying? I mean, you know, we subscribe to Netflix. I mean, every day, what do I get in my inbox? Fred, you may be interested in this movie. You know what I mean? Or we got something just for you. Right? No, I'm not planning anything, but you can see it. You see how that can be a distraction from what? From really, remember the first one, how I want to live my life and how I want to spend my time. So we know, right? And now we know with all this stuff that's coming out around YouTube, you know what I mean? Not YouTube, what's it? Facebook, you know what I mean? How sophisticated this whole process is, right? He's not a disturbance. Okay? Usha. It's not a disturbance. Don't engage. So this is living Dharma. You see, don't engage. It's fine.
She's the only one who's not on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, good for her. Right? But we're learning that Facebook, is very sophisticated in what? Yeah, in targeting you with things that it'll know will distract you and get you to do things you never thought you were going to do, right? I mean, we have to understand that this capacity, that whatever he was talking about were distractions in the 13th and 14th century, are way up now, right? I mean, he was talking about distractions of a very simple, primarily agricultural trading society, right? That's all that was going on, in Tibet, very thinly populated, right? Don't engage distractions. And spiritual practice naturally grows. Very powerful. Okay. What's our spiritual practice? You can see, we're only in the third verse, but remember, our spiritual practice is study, reflect, and meditate. This is our practice of a bodhisattva. Remember that one? So, a distraction is something that distracts us from something. Is that clear? I mean, it's important that we understand a distraction is something that distracts us from something. I mean, I'm not doing too simple, am I? I mean, is that clear? That's what a distraction is. But if you're not clear where you're going, how would you know what a distraction is? Think about it. See, there's no such thing as a distraction, right? You see, if you're a movie critic, watching movies is not a distraction because that's what you do. You see? But if you're doing something else, watching lots of movies is a distraction. Right? If there are certain things you want to do with your time, if you have certain things that you prioritize in your life, then things that take you away from that are called a what? A distraction, you see. But if you're not clear about what your life's about, then you don't know what a distraction is, Then you're just wide open. Right? In the same way, when we're meditating and we want to meditate on something, right? Then anything that takes us away from what we want to meditate is a what? Distraction. Other times it may not be. There are some people who say, well, everybody says, well, I meditate. And I say, well, I'm always interested, well, what do you do when you meditate? And some people say, well, I kind of quiet my mind and work on my problems. No, I mean, and that's fine. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? That's fine, but that's not, in the Buddhist tradition, what we call meditation. Okay? If we were meditating in terms of like the practice we did this morning, right? Concentrating on our breath, our body, to calm and stabilize our mind, right? Ruminating and trying to figure out an answer to some of my life problems would be a what? A major distraction. You see? But if your meditative practice is to work out my problems, then your problems aren't a distraction. Do you see what I'm saying? So you kind of have to know what you're doing. Or the label distraction doesn't mean anything. Right? If you want to drive to Gainesville, right? Exploring Ocala is a distraction. You see? If you want to get to Gainesville, if you're just going, I'm going to get on the road and just see where see where a car takes me. No, stopping in Ocala, spending a few years there. Right? You see what I'm saying? Why not? You see? But if you got an appointment, you want to get to Gainesville, then it's a distraction, you see? I mean, is that clear? So it behooves us, And again, now he's talking in terms of this Bodhisattva path. If we do see as, fundamental purpose of our life to awaken ourselves, to stabilize our minds and calm our mind, right? If this is right, then things that take us away from that are distractions. And so what does he say about distractions? Don't engage them. Same thing. Don't stop them from coming up, but when you get on the internet, know where you're going and know what you're doing and just do it. And then get off. Right? When you get on Facebook, know what you're getting on Facebook for, have a time limit, and get off. If you don't, for those of you who don't do it that way, what's going to happen? What? Anybody want to kind of fess up? What happens? What?
I was on Facebook because my daughter told me to get on Facebook and get an account. So I did.
Then what happened?
Well, 6 hours later, I had not gone back and closed the account because it was just so shocking.
Yeah. So again, but is that, a word of caution, right? It's like that. And so if you're not clear what your purpose is, right, it's very easy to get distracted, especially these days. Right? We are highly distractible people. Have you noticed that? Our capacity to be concentrated is always very challenging. Why? Because distractibility is our norm. You see? I don't think it was such an issue in Togme Zangpo's time. They had a much simpler life, much simpler mind, a lot more time just outdoors doing repetitive tasks. You know what I mean? The mind was much simpler. I think concentration came much easier. But, we live at a time where it's much more challenging. And we have to be aware of that, so we have to kind of set our own limits on so many of these things in life. Right? For many of us growing up, you got the news from a newspaper once a day. Right? Or you watched the 6 o'clock news. You know what I mean? It was a definable moment. But now you can watch the news when? All the time, right? And they're always milking it, so they're always giving you updates, right? So all of a sudden, what became a time-limited event to kind of stay abreast of, quote, what's going on, now becomes what? 24/7. And so it's if you're not careful, right? You can very easily just be, all day long now, something now is new in life. It's like when somebody asks you, do you know what's happening in the world? It's really like what happened in the last 30 minutes. Right? If you're not aware of what's happened in the last 30 minutes, you're out of touch. Right? Or if you don't know what your friends have done in the last 15 minutes, you're out of touch. Right? Just had a good breakfast. Right? I don't really do these things, but I do hear about it. Had a good breakfast. Going to get my hair cut. I'll send you a picture. Right? The trivial has become important. So again, but is everybody clear? That's what we're dealing with, so we have to be very aware. Don't engage disturbances and emotional reactions will gradually fade away. Okay. Our emotional reactivity will gradually fade away. Don't engage distractions, and spiritual practice naturally grows. Right? For so many people, their spiritual practice, their spiritual life is a struggle, right? It's hard. Why is that? because we're just endlessly distracted from our tasks. But if we stop endlessly being involved in distraction, we will find we have more time to be concentrated on that which we want to develop in, and we will find that our spiritual life is bearing fruits. But if we're endlessly distracted, if we're in and out and in and out, right? Anybody here ever kind of develop a skill with an instrument? All right, what instrument was that? Oh, okay. So if I said to you, is there a difference? No. No, I was going to say, is there a difference? No. Let me ask you a question. Is there a difference if you're going to practice an hour a day, that instrument? Let's just say an hour. Is there a difference between practicing for an hour in one concentrated hour, or why not just practice 25-minute practice periods throughout a 24-hour period? Same hour. Would you say, in terms of developing skill and competence, there's any difference between practicing for 5 minutes and practicing for an hour?
Well, when you said the 25 minutes as opposed to...
No, 25-minute periods.
25-minute periods. I'm trying to think about it. Theories will tell you that you're not going to get much done in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I just want to say I would be more apt to do it because I could do it in 5-minute increments.
But if you wanted to really become competent at the instrument,
you need to sit down and practice.
Right. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Doesn't mean that you might not get a little benefit from your 20 discrete 5-minute practice sessions,
Right.
but you may find yourself 2 years later more or less in the same place. Well, but again, it depends what's your priority. You see? If your priority is, I really want to get good at the clarinet, you'll find a way. It may have to do with rearranging your schedule. You know what I mean? I'm not saying...
Absolutely.
Right, and that's clear. And so, again, if we want to develop competency at this, we can't just do it by, a bunch of little tiny 5, 10, 15-minute increments. Not to say that may not bring some benefit, right? But don't expect to become masterful, right? So don't engage distractions, and spiritual practice naturally grows. And then he says, keep awareness clear and vivid, and confidence in the way arises. Rely on silence. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. So, what is this awareness? Clear and vivid, right? It's right now, right? We are all aware. We are aware of what we see, we are aware of what we hear, we are aware of what we smell, we are aware of what we taste, we are aware of what's going on within our body, and we have the capacity of being aware of what's going on in our mind. This is awareness. It is always here. The light is always on. He says, keep it clear and vivid. When our awareness is clear and vivid, present to whatever's arising, then we can what? Act and respond to situations in clarity. Because we see what's going on. Our mind's awareness is present and alive. But if we do not keep our awareness, our mindfulness clear, if we are endlessly distracted, if we are endlessly lost in emotionality and drama, right, we will not be clear and vivid at all, or just a little bit. And so he says, it's interesting, he says, if you keep your awareness clear and vivid, confidence in the way will grow. Now, the way that he's talking about is this path, right? He's talking now about the path of awakening, right? This path that those who enter this path who want to develop their skills and abilities and capacities to show up in the world as a bodhisattva, to really help beings end their suffering. He says, if you keep your awareness, your mindfulness clear and vivid, then your confidence that this way works, that's confidence, will grow. Right? Many of us, even years into it, really lack trust and confidence in the path. Right? Because we do not keep our minds clear. If our minds aren't clear, we're always just reacting emotionally or historically to situations. Which means more or less, we find ourselves more or less in sort of being kind of the same person we always were. We're perhaps a little calmer, a little less reactive, but we're more or less kind of experiencing ourselves as the way we always are. We don't see real evidence in our life of real change and transformation, which means we don't really have that much growing confidence that this path works. Is that clear? So he's saying, the problem can be the instrument. We're not keeping this instrument clear. I may have gotten glasses, right? But if I don't keep my glasses clean, I could go, I don't need, that doctor didn't know what he was talking about, that I need glasses. I don't see any better than I used to. You see? And why don't I do that? Because I'm not keeping the glasses clean. So I'm not getting the benefits of glasses. So my confidence in the glasses and in the prescribing person, I don't have confidence and trust. Is that clear? He's saying if you keep your mind clear and vivid and alive, you'll see what's before you, you'll see what's happening, you'll be able to apply these prior practices about don't engage. If you don't see a disturbance for a disturbance, if you don't see a distraction for a distraction, how are you ever going to not engage? Right? Don't engage disturbances. Don't engage distractions. Right? Well, if I don't see a distraction as a distraction, if I don't see a disturbance as a disturbance, what's going to stop me from continually engaging according to my historical reactivity? Nothing. Right? So then I'll come to the conclusion, what? Buddhism's really not for me. Right? This path, I really don't have confidence or trust. It doesn't really work. Can you see? But it's because we're not practicing. When you practice the path and you keep the mind clear and you see distractions as distractions, disturbances as disturbances, and you know how to handle them, your trust and your confidence that the path works and bears fruits will also continue to grow. And then he says this interesting thing, rely on silence. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Now, this could mean for some of us we take a vow of silence. That may not go over big in our families and work situation. Right? So, or we could decide, well, I'll just go around telling everybody else to be silent. Maybe that's one way to get silence in my life. I'll just tell everybody else to just be more silent. And that may not go over big. Right? So, the silence that a bodhisattva cultivates is the silence within their own mind. That's the silence. More silence in there. More silence in our life. Right? What are we doing on a day like this? Of course, I'm talking, but hopefully you're not ruminating about what I'm saying. Just letting it come in and out. So, more silence. More quiet. Very hard to get people just to go for a walk without those things in their ears. Right? Yesterday I went to the beach. People used to go to the beach for what? For silence. Right? It's quiet there. Listen to the water. And now most people are what? You see walking along the beach are good things in their ears. Right? Or people, even though they're at the beach, on their blankets or their chairs, what are they checking every 5 minutes? And showing the other people, hey, look. Right? I mean, where's the silence of the places that used to nourish us, right? The places where there used to be silence and places we could go to silence, if we're not careful, we don't even have those anymore. But the important thing is to cultivate the silence within, and we do that through meditation. We learn, we can calm the mind, we can quiet the mind, and we can find a silence within this awareness of our body, of our breath. We quiet down. There's not so much noise in there. It doesn't mean that, there's no thoughts. There's always going to be thoughts. But it means they're not noisy. For now, many of us have very noisy minds, right? It's not that we have thoughts, but they're kind of loud, insistent thoughts, right? They're always getting our attention. So there's no silence. So one can have silence even in noise, right? So we can be sitting here in the meditation hall and we can hear a voice outside and we can hear cars and we can hear other things, but we can be silent. We don't engage with them. We just maintain this inner mindfulness, even in the midst of noise. We can cultivate a stillness even when there's a lot of activity going around us. The metaphor, the eye in the hurricane, the eye of the hurricane, right? The eye of the hurricane is still, even though around us, right? Thich Nhat Hanh always used to use the metaphor, of the whole movement of the boat people from Vietnam, when I think hundreds of thousands left Vietnam, and they left by boats in often very dangerous circumstances, crossing the Gulf there, and he would say, when there was rough weather, when there was difficulty, and everybody's getting scared and panicking, who's going to be that one person, to stay calm and clear, right? To offer stability to the other people, but also to kind of be able to think clearly, looking for an intelligent response to the situation, right? In the same way, we need within ourselves a place, right, where we can pull back into a place of quiet, a place of calmness, a place of stability, right, where we can renew ourselves. And so when we do act in the world, we're acting from a place of stillness and inner calmness, even though outwardly we may be active. Right? Is that clear? Just because you have to be active doesn't mean that you have to be disturbed in your mind. You could just be moving and responding to situations. You can be quiet. But if the mind is if we're engaged in distraction, if we're engaged in the disturbance, if we're ruminating, if we're projecting, if we're, obsessing, we're lost, aren't we? There's no silence. There's no silence, there's no clarity. So, those are just the first 3 verses. Let's spend a few moments. We have about 5 minutes before we end. Any questions or just, how to do this? Remember we talked about the first verse, to really understand that we have this vehicle and that, it's a great vehicle for practicing the way of the Bodhisattva, the study, the reflection, contemplation, the meditation. He warned us about this whole life of attraction, aversion, and indifference. Just keeps us in a constant state of disturbance. He then went a little deeper into telling us that, that emotional reactivity is only coming from because we're engaged in whatever we're calling a disturbance, and that, the major impediment to our spiritual development, our meditation, which is distraction, comes because we're engaged in those distractions. And he advised us to practice keeping the mind clear and vivid so we can see clearly distractions and disturbances, and to cultivate an inner stillness, an inner silence, even in the midst of activity. It takes time. Yes, so are there any questions about any of this, about how to do in terms of your own life? Yes.
So my question came up when you were listening to not engaging in distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for me personally, in theory, like one distraction or maybe two, I can still find that peace of mind. But just use my personal example, I teach high school.
Right.
So I have like 28 distractions at once, all vying for my attention, and the first ones will come up, and I'm like, all right, peace of mind, handle this. And at some point, it becomes very overwhelming. How do we continue to keep that inner calm when you're, like, it's a constant bombardment?
Yeah.
So whether it's the traffic or, like I said, my personal work example, because that's when I find myself losing my patience, and I don't want to.
Yeah, so that's a real question. So the question is, again, the woman is a high school teacher. She says, I don't have one or two or three disturbances. I have, or distractions. I have 25 or 27. And, it's not like they come in little waves. They often come one after the other. Right. So, and she says, I'm good for the first 3 or 4, but as the day probably unfolds, I get more and more disturbed. My mind gets more and more agitated. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you know that. And at the same time, you would like to have a calmer mind. Okay. So you know what your goal is, but you also know the environment you're working in, which is important. Okay? You're not just tutoring one student, right? You're in a situation where even at its best, there's going to be a lot going on, right? So you want to, first of all, make sure that you have a mind state that's accepting of what is. Okay? Oftentimes, again, this is that whole thing about engaging in disturbance. If we see what's going on as a disturbance, it can throw us. On the other hand, if you see what's going on as just, this is normal. My expectation that it'll be different will cause me to suffer. In the same way, if someone, like Nancy was saying, if someone has an expectation that when I go to meditate today, I'm going to have a quiet, peaceful mind, one will find that if one has lots of thoughts or one internal chatter, one will be disturbed by that because one has an expectation that it should be different. Right? So the important thing is, first of all, to make sure that, that your expectations are in reality. This is important. Okay? Because again, if you have an expectation that somehow the class should be different than they are and teenagers should be different than they are, you will find your level of frustration or resistance to what's going on much stronger. All right? So the first step is to be totally open to reality. Okay? That's the best thing. There may be somebody trying to get in or something. I don't know. Oh, you know what? there is a workshop going on next door, and some of them may have their food here. Now they've been told, a lot of them are members or meditate, so they've been told, just so you know, to be quiet. It's silent. So we'll see whether but if you see people wandering around outside or during lunch, they're having lunch, I think, simultaneously, and that could be what's going on. Okay? So the first thing is make sure, it's like, when you're crossing the Howard Franklin Bridge, have an expectation that there could be traffic, you see. If your expectation is always going to be clear sailing, then traffic will be disturbing. Right? Or, if you think that somehow miraculously yesterday's jerks are going to all act right today, you're going to, you're going to be disappointed, aren't you? Right? You got to go to work with, the jerks are still there and they're still going to be jerks. That's who they are. I mean, there are other ways of dealing with it, but first thing is have a clear expectation. Is that clear? Now, do one thing at a time. There may be 27 things to do, but each one is whatever is right before you. Just do that. This is important. And when you're done with that, go on to the next, and don't carry from the one you just. This takes training in mindfulness. In Zen we say just do one thing. There may be 100 things to do, but in reality, in the present moment, you only have to do the thing that is before you. Okay? So they may be 27 lined up to see you, but you just want to be totally present to the one that's in front of you. Just totally 100% dealing with whatever they're presenting, and then when they leave, you relax your mind. Right? I mean, often, we say to people, who work in busy offices, you don't have to pick up the phone the first time. Let it ring 3 or 4 times, and just take a minute to enjoy your breathing. Quiet yourself. Right? Give yourself, you see. You need to know yourself. Right? That's mindfulness, vivid and clear. You need to know yourself and the state of your mind. And when you see that you're beginning to lose it, you need to what? Stop. You can tell people you're going to the bathroom. Right? You know what I'm saying? Nobody will challenge you on that one. Right? And when you go there, right? Take a few minutes rather than, regurgitating everything that's gone on. Take that time to what? Just relax yourself. Come back to zero. Come back to stability. That's important, especially for many of us have jobs that are what? Active. A lot going on. So we have to find places where we can intervene in that schedule and give ourselves, moments of mindfulness, moments of relaxation, moments of letting go. Right? And that, most of us, even if we work, we have break times or we have lunch times, How do we use those times, you see? Do we just keep it going? You see? And then you wonder why at the end of the day, you're all revved up. But, it's important. Again, it depends what your goal is. What's your name? Maria. I mean, if your goal is, I love what I'm doing, but I don't want it to kill me. Okay? I love what I'm doing, but I have a life after school, you see? And I don't want to, end the day just frazzled. Okay? You see, that's your goal. Right? So then you kind of look at what you're doing and go, well, how can I do it a little differently so I end up at the end of the day, maybe a little tired and weary. I'm not saying teaching high school is, a piece of cake. Do you see what I'm saying? But at least not frazzled. And a lot of that is, again, how you approach the job. And a lot of it is, again, can you build into it moments to just kind of reset your clock? And they may just be a minute here, 2 minutes here, maybe if you can grab 15 or something, just to kind of, rather than going to the lunchroom where everybody's just blah, 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 No, you may be going to find another place where you can just go and be peaceful, quiet. And if people say, well, what's happened to Maria? She's kind of antisocial. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, you can't tell, well, I'm trying this meditation thing or something. Just, what I mean? You don't have to say too much, but you can kind of let people know, yeah, I'm trying something else because, and that could be a good example to the other people, right? Skipping ahead to verse 22 of the 37. This is a very important verse. Whatever arises in experience is your mind. Mind itself is free of any conceptual limitations. Know that, and don't entertain subject-object fixations. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. You might be wondering what that means. So the teachings of Buddhism are very much like an Olympic-sized pool, you see. If you get in and at the shallow end, you can stand. And it's a different experience than jumping in at the deep end. So the Buddha's teachings are like that. Some of them are very easily understandable and accessible and kind of give us a structure and a grounding immediately, like some of the ones we heard this morning. And some of them take a little more effort. But if they're true, in a reality-based sense, then we should be able to understand them. So, whatever arises in experience is your own mind. Now that may sound sort of crazy, right? Because you might be like looking up here and going, what? I see Fred, I see the altar, I see everything, right? What does he mean? What does Togme Zangpo mean when he says, whatever arises in experience is your own mind, right? We think, no, I'm not looking at my own mind, I'm looking at Fred, or I'm looking at the altar, right? Wouldn't we say that? Yeah, we would say that. But if you reflect on it, if you're seeing, and even if there was an eye organ, the eye, somehow connected to a body, right? There still wouldn't be seeing, right? Right? So, I mean, if you looked at a dead body, then you'd see an eye connected still to a central nervous system and a brain, but it's not seeing, is it? The ears aren't hearing, the nose aren't smelling, right? All the senses. What is missing is mind, right? How do you know that you're looking at me? Because you're looking at me through your mind. And actually, I am appearing in your mind. You are hearing me in your mind. And if you're smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, it's all going on where? You can say it this time. in your mind, in our mind, or better yet, in mind. Right? When you feel something, happy or sad, angry or peaceful, where are you experiencing those feelings? When you're remembering your childhood, something pleasant or something unpleasant, where are you experiencing that experience? When you're thinking about the future, either positively or negatively, where you're experiencing that experience? In your mind. So, when he says, whatever arises in experience is your own mind, right? When you are, I don't know, when you're happy and you're really feeling good, notice how the world appears to you and other people. When you're depressed and angry, notice how the world appears to you. Right? It could be the same world, same people. What's different? Why does it appear so differently? Why do people appear so differently? When you love them, they appear one way. A day later, you hate them, and they appear another way. Right? Why is that? Because they're appearing in our mind. Right? Whatever arises in experience is your own mind. So this is a fundamental teaching of Buddhism, which is so important. Because if we don't understand this, we think the cause of all my problems and my issues, the source of my happiness or suffering, and the world's happiness or suffering, is where? Out there. So therefore I am very diligently working to what? Fix the whole thing, right? Maria's back there just trying to get those 27 high schoolers under control because they are the source of suffering. But as of today, she'll go home and go, no, they're just doing what they do, right? And if I'm suffering, it's because of me. It's arising within me. See? And that's probably the most positive thing that we can hear. Why is that? Because if I said to Maria, can you change all those 27 kids? And Maria would say, and if you thought that was your task, that the only way you could enjoy teaching was if you had all 27 of them marching and just to Maria's commands, right? You'd have a lot of work ahead of you, wouldn't you? And you probably would be frustrated and disappointed a lot. You see? But when you understood that they're just all appearing in my mind, right? And whatever I'm feeling about them or thinking about them or projecting about them is all arising from my mind. Oh, you now have the key to what? To your own happiness. It doesn't mean, you can just go to class every day and just sit there. Right? I mean, you're still going to have to do something, but your mind will be very different because you understand these teachings. So when he says, when you know that and don't entertain subject-object fixation, subject-object fixations mean me here, you there. See, there's a subject and an object, but when you understand, it's all arising in my mind. I'm arising in my mind. The projection of me is just another thing that's arising in my mind. Then you see it's all mind. And so all of a sudden meditation and all these practices we do of our mind become so meaningful. Whatever arises in experience is your own mind. What else could it be? If we didn't have a mind, how would we experience anything? Dead people are not experiencing anything, are they? They have no conscious awareness at all. And yet they have all the faculties that we have. So that's why mind is the key player here. And when we know that everything that we perceive is a perception of the mind, everything we feel is coming from a perception of the mind, then we know a very important truth. And we don't entertain subject-object fixations. Fixation means something fixed. Something stuck. Something is fixed to the wall. Something is fixed in place, right? There's no fluidity in it. There's no openness in it. When we fixate, we're stuck. But when Maria realizes those 27 students of hers, all her ideas about them, right, positive or negative, are all arising where? In your mind. She's pointing to her mind. Right? It's a very different thing than thinking, oh, they're all out there, different than me. Even people we live with, that we see all the time, are just creations of our mind. Creations of our projections, creations of our needs and our wants, creations of our memories and history. Is that true? And if we know that, what is the significance of knowing that? Yeah, because things are what they are. But how do you see what they are, you see? That's the thing. Accepting things as they are. But how are things? See, that's the interesting question. Then how are things? Things are impermanent, right? Ever changing, ever in process. Everything is like that. Everything is just made up of parts. Everything's just a composite of parts. Right? Just constantly unfolding, moment to moment. Right? You may not believe this, even though you may still appear to exist in the same form that you were a minute ago. You are different than you were a minute ago. If you didn't have a fixed idea of who you are, and if you just showed up as you are in the moment, you would see it's constantly changing, constantly unfolding, and everyone else is the same way. So if Maria saw things that way when she went to school every day, how would she relate to her 27 students? How would you see them every day? Take a guess. very fresh, in the moment. Who they were yesterday may not be who they are today. But if I see them as they were yesterday, then we're stuck. It's not as if you don't have the knowledge you have, having worked with them, but you don't let that fixate on them. Same way with all our relationships, all our experiences in the world. Fresh, new, open. Whatever arises in experience is your own mind. Mind itself is free of any conceptual limitations. In Buddhism and the meditative path, we do a lot of meditation on what is the mind? What is it really as an experience? And often we find it is limitless, boundaryless, without any fixation whatsoever. When you know that and don't entertain these fixations, I'm you, I'm me, you're you, or maybe I really am you and you're me. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. That's verse 22. And then just for ending, in 36 he says, in short, everything you do, question how your mind is moment by moment. By being constantly present and aware, you bring about what helps others. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. To dispel the suffering of beings without limit, with wisdom freed from the three domains, direct all the goodness generated by these efforts to awakening. This is the practice of a bodhisattva.